I find math to be a logical and very complex subject. Math has many facets, and in order to be successful, it has to make sense to you. There are a few aspects of math that, however, don't seem logical to me, and I understand that especially for some younger children, it is hard to see the logic behind something. But of course, math is more than just logical. Math is endless. If you take a fraction, it can go on forever, like for example 1/3. There's no reason to believe, if you look at it as a decimal, so 0.33 and so on, that the threes behind the decimal dot will ever end. I find it to be interesting to think of math as infinite because you cannot see what does not end. If you take infinity, it is a constant cycle of repetition that goes on and on forever. I feel like that could be taken as a metaphor for a teacher's development, since it is also a cycle of acquiring more and more knowledge every day, and I believe that that cycle will also go on forever, because you can never know everything that there is to know in any subject. I think it is human to not have all the answers. Children have to see that you, as a teacher, have flaws as well, because then it is easier for them to accept their own. If you look at pi, it is infinite, but it never repeats itself. In school, the process of learning is endless, but it also never repeats itself since you learn new things every day. Also very common in school are mistakes. We all make them, but we expect children to not make them, because if they do, they get a bad grade. I don't think this is entirely fair to put a stamp on children like that. I also believe that it doesn't help them to become more successful. It only makes them feel as if they can't do it, and they start to lose confidence. A lot of children start to fear math in primary schools, and I believe that in most cases it reflects on the teacher. It is the teacher's responsibility to make sure that the children are able to enjoy, or at least be motivated to try and solve mathematical problems. For me as a future teacher, this is very important because I want the children to have fun with math. I believe that being afraid never helped a child to conquer or learn anything, because once you are afraid, you stop caring about it. So as a teacher, you have to make sure that you are careful with teaching math from the beginning. If you make the children feel like they are not getting it, and they should, it will have an effect on them in the future. It all starts right here, when we are born. You as a teacher or parent can make a child learn to appreciate math. If you take a positive approach when you introduce mathematics to the young ones, I believe that you will be rewarded with children that want to try to achieve and learn. I think this is true for all subjects, but in math, you need to be more aware. I included this quote because I truly believe that this is accurate. Like I mentioned, making someone feel that they are not good enough and that they can't do anything is pointless in education. Children need encouragement and praise, of course only in certain amounts, since you probably also don't want the children to be overconfident. Math is filled with numbers and symbols. Learning what those symbols are is most of the times one of the easier tasks. What goes in front, behind, or in between those symbols is the tricky part. Multiplication, for example, starts out with needing to memorize all the facts, which then makes division easier. The same is true for addition and subtraction. They all intertwine. When children begin to learn about mathematics, it is mostly through play. They don't realize at first that they are starting to familiarize themselves with shapes, words, and visuals that will later help them to understand math. As a teacher in kindergarten, I would expect that the children are being introduced to such things, but without any expectations at first. Learning through play is what, in my opinion, connects kindergarten with first grade and primary. The children learn addition and subtraction with building blocks and number lines. They need models to help them visualize and understand concepts. I would want the children to have something that they can hold and explore with to help them connect math with the real world. What I think helps children to connect math with the outside world are shapes. Children can find shapes everywhere, they're all around us. You can find a square or rectangle in windows or shelves. A circle is found in pots and pans, jewelry and cakes. Shapes are one of the first things children learn in math, and they can also help them to put math in a real-life context. In our big problem for teaching practice, we also made use of shapes. We used the trapezoid, which is one of the more uncommon shapes. Using tables shaped like this was a great way for the children to learn a new shape while figuring out the correct pattern of the tables. Teaching the big problem helped me to be able to put math in a real-life situation for the children. I realized that as the children get older, math becomes more formal. Children start to use calculators instead of doing mental math. I believe that when children start to rely on their calculator, they realize they don't need to remember all the facts, since the calculator now does it for them. During the minor, I had to relearn all the standard algorithms because I had been only using my calculator in the last years of high school. I do understand that for some computations you need a calculator, but in general it has become a tool the children start to rest on. By using too much technology, I believe children lose the power to think for themselves and give all that to the machines. I don't think we are in need of something to think for us. We are capable of doing so ourselves. It can be a helpful tool, but it should not define who we are. What makes math even more fascinating is if you look at it as its own language. For me, math is a universal language. Some cultures use different symbols, but it is also a way to communicate with people who normally speak a different language than your own. Math might use different terms of length and width, but when it comes to numbers, everyone uses the same. I believe it to be very significant to think of math as a language because it is what connects us with different countries, regions, and cultures. Instead of characters, math uses geometrical figures, numbers, and symbols to communicate. I think it is amazing to see math as a universal language since it can break barriers between cultures because math is always there, no matter in what country you find yourself. To come back to my vision of math, I want to be a teacher that the children are not afraid to ask for help for. I believe the children need someone who encourages them rather than puts them down for mistakes. Like I said before, mistakes are what make us human, and children need to feel that someone cares if they succeed or if they don't. And since sometimes they do not get that at home, you have to provide that as a teacher. Something I remember from when I was still in school is that math always starts out fun, but once you get stuck, it starts to complicate things. I would like the children to understand that getting stuck is the most fun part of math, because you rack your brain trying to get the answer, and therefore you need to think outside the box. What almost feels like magic is the accomplishment you feel once you solve that problem and were able to succeed.